The glass fell, splashing wine on Daniel's white shirt. The waiter chuckled, wiping slowly. "Those are rented suits, right?" But that look Daniel gave silently was the harbinger of an earthquake. The whole restaurant seemed to exude luxury. Crystal glasses reflected soft yellow light. The scent of white truffles mixed with red wine wafted through the air. Suppressed laughter echoed between polished mahogany tables. Everything there cost more than some people earn in a month. Daniel arranged his napkin on his lap. His dark suit was impeccable, the shoulders perfectly cut, and his shoes gleamed like a mirror. He waited for his order with the poise of someone who knew his own size. The waiter approached, measured steps, polite smile that hurts. He placed the plate in front of Daniel with a movement too sudden to be an accident. The dish clattered to the table. The sound cut through the air. "Sir, this isn't self-service, okay?" The sentence came softly, shrouded in irony, a whisper that hides nothing. Daniel looked up slowly. He didn't speak. He just stared. The silence weighed more than any answer. The waiter blinked. He smiled again, but this time something faltered. His hand adjusted his tie unnecessarily. Daniel took a deep breath. He returned his gaze to the wine glass in front of him. The distorted reflection of the room danced in the red liquid. There, in that silence, something changed. Daniel's face is serene, but in his eyes, a flame that needs no words to burn. The waiter took half a step back. He didn't understand why. The surrounding tables continued talking. No one noticed, or they pretended not to notice. But Daniel knew. That look was already the first blow, and the entire room still had no idea who was sitting in that chair. The reflection in the glass mirrored more than luxury. It mirrored an earthquake beginning silently. The public expected an explosion, scream, tables turned over, loud voice echoing through the hall. But Daniel merely adjusted the cuff of his jacket. A slow, almost ceremonial gesture. His fingers glided over the fabric like someone tuning an instrument before playing. He took a deep breath, a breath that carried entire oceans, rage, memory, strategy, all contained there, in that chest that rose and fell with ancient control. The waiter expected a reaction, something that would validate the disdain, something that would confirm the narrative he'd already written in his head. But Daniel remained motionless. In memory, grandmother's voice echoed like distant thunder. "Never lower your chin, boy. Let them look up." She said this in the small kitchen, pot on the stove, hands full of flour. Her firm voice spanned generations. Daniel looked up, not with anger, with something more dangerous, certainty. He picked up the wine glass. He swirled the liquid slowly, observing the circular motion. The light danced in the crystal. Each swirl was a silent countdown. The waiter was still there, waiting. His smile was beginning to crack at the edges. Daniel placed the glass back on the table. The sound of crystal touching marble echoed like a bell. Not everything that is kept quiet is acceptance. The sentence fell through the air like a blade. Simple, direct, fatal. The waiter blinked. He smiled again, but this time it was crooked. Forced. He turned away too quickly. He almost tripped in his own haste. He thought he had won. Little did he know that the game had just begun. Daniel turned his gaze to the dining room. The tables continued chattering. Cutlery clinked against plates. Laughter floated through the air conditioning. No one noticed the war that had just been declared in a whisper. But he noticed his calm wasn't surrender. It was the first gun loaded, and the entire room watched him without understanding that the board had already turned. Daniel's silence weighed more than any scream, because those who master their own fire never need to show the flames. The tables watched. Some disguised themselves, sideways glances, low conversations that pretended weren't about him. Others didn't even try to hide it. Cell phones subtly raised, cameras pointed as if he were a spectacle. The hostess rearranged menus that were already lined up. Her eyes fixed on the counter, her neck tense. She knew. Everyone knew. The manager watched from afar, arms crossed, leaning against the mahogany wall, waiting, calculating when to intervene, or if he should. Refined racism echoed in the porcelain. There was no screaming, There was no explicit violence, just the suffocating weight of being judged for existing in that space. Daniel cut a piece of meat. The knife glided across the plate with surgical precision. He chewed slowly, unhurriedly. Every gesture was a sign of resistance. The entire hall became a silent courtroom. Judges in suits and long gowns. Sentence already written before the verdict. A customer at the next table murmured to her husband, "Does this still happen?" Her voice trembled between disbelief and second-hand embarrassment. The husband shrugged. He returned to his plate, but she didn't come back. His eyes met Daniel's for a second, just one. There, in that brief intersection, something changed. It wasn't pity, it was recognition, the kind of look that says, "I saw it, I witnessed it, you are not alone." Daniel nodded slightly.
The gesture was almost imperceptible, but she understood. The micro turnaround didn't come from the oppressor this time. It came from the unexpected solidarity of those who decided not to be complicit in silence. The waiter passed by again, tray balanced, eyes fleeting. He avoided Daniel like someone avoiding a broken mirror, but Daniel no longer needed his approval. There was something bigger growing inside. The memory of where she came from.
The strength of someone who carries generations on their shoulders. And as the hall continued its theater of indifference, Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. The smell of bar soap invaded his mind. Wet floor. His father's calloused hands repairing wooden chairs. Memory pulled him back in time, and history was about to turn. The invisible trial had just found its secret jury, his own story. Soft CTA. Have you ever experienced something like this? Comment below. Smell of bar soap. Strong, harsh, honest. The kind of scent that sticks to your skin and your memory. Daniel was 8 years old. The cement floor was wet. Light reflected through the small window. His father was crouched down, repairing wooden chairs, sanding, nailing, straightening crooked legs. His hands were like work maps, calluses on his fingertips. Nails always had traces of paint on them. The mother entered the kitchen, apron tied around her waist, pot steaming on the stove. Whoever serves food with respect never goes hungry for dignity. She said this every time someone came to pick up their lunch. She treated each customer like family. She wrapped it with care. She smiled as she delivered it. Daniel watched everything from the small table where he did his homework. His notebook was torn, his pencil sharpened with a razor blade. He dreamed those nights. He dreamed of opening his own restaurant, a place where no one would be judged by the color of their skin or the cut of their suit, where service was sacred, not submission, where dignity was the first dish on the menu. The father got up and wiped his hands on the floor cloth. "Daniel, come here." The boy approached. His father placed a heavy hand on his shoulder. "One day you'll have yours. And when you do, remember, place doesn't make a man. Man makes place." The deep voice echoed through the small kitchen. It echoed for years. He's back now. There, in that crystal and white truffle restaurant. Daniel opened his eyes. The room was still there. The waiter was still there. The contempt was still there. But something inside him had changed. Memory didn't bring sadness. It brought fuel. Humiliation became purpose. Anger became method. He smiled slightly, not with happiness, with recognition. He recognized his own strength. The same strength his father had when he fixed broken chairs. The same strength his mother packed in every lunchbox. Strength that does not shout. Strength that builds. Daniel adjusted his fork. He took a deep breath, and when he looked up again, he was no longer the man who had walked in half an hour ago. He was the boy who dreamed, the son who inherited, the man who built. And the waiter, who now returned to the table with the same polite arrogance, still didn't know he was serving his own boss. The turnaround began in the heart, where all true revolutions are born. The waiter returned, light steps, a smile glued to his face like a wax mask. An empty tray balanced in his left hand, a notebook in his right. He stood beside the desk. His posture was straight, professional. But there was something too forced about the way he held the pen. "May I write down dessert, sir?" The word "sir" came out wrapped in plastic. Politeness that doesn't warm. Kindness that cuts. Daniel looked up slowly. just to make sure you understand the menu." The irony dripped like poisoned honey. The waiter smiled. He expected a reaction. He expected anger, discomfort, and an awkward silence. But Daniel just watched. He observed as if reading an open book. Each page revealed insecurity disguised as authority. Each line revealed the fear of losing control. Daniel tilted his head slightly. "Of course, I'm in love with this menu." The sentence hung in the air without apparent weight. But something about it shifted the conversation's axis. The waiter blinked. Twice. Too quickly. "Oh, really? Did you already know?" "I know every dish, every ingredient, every detail." Daniel's voice remained calm, almost soft. But there was a density to it, as if each word carried a second meaning that could not yet be deciphered. The waiter hesitated. The pen hung in the air for a second longer than usual. Daniel reached out and touched the linen napkin on the table. He smoothed the folds with his fingers, a tiny, almost imperceptible gesture. But it was a warning. The kind of gesture that marks territory without having to shout. The waiter swallowed hard. He didn't quite understand what had just happened, but he felt the change in the air. "So, dessert?" "Not now." Daniel returned his gaze to the empty plate in front of him. The silence between them grew thick. The waiter took a half step back. He tried to maintain his smile, but the mask was beginning to slip. "Anything, just call." He turned his back. He walked toward the counter. His steps were too quick. His posture was too rigid. He didn't know what had gone wrong, but he knew something had changed. Daniel remained motionless, his fingers still on the napkin. The light but deliberate touch of someone who knows his own power. The waiter's false kindness was beginning to crack, and behind the polite mask, fear appeared like a damp stain on a white wall. The tables were turning, and the oppressor was beginning to feel the weight of his own arrogance crumbling. One small mistake was about to expose who was really in control. The notebook fell. The dry sound of paper hitting marble. The waiter tried to pick it up, but his fingers slipped. Daniel bent down. He picked it up from the floor before the waiter could complete the movement. For a moment, the two of them stood too close. The smell of expensive perfume mixed with nervous sweat. Daniel lifted the notebook. He held it calmly. He handed it back. His eyes met the waiter's, and this time they didn't look away. The gaze was firm, calm, sovereign. There was no anger. There was something more devastating. Absolute certainty. "You should take better care of what is yours." The sentence came out calmly, almost paternal, but it hung in the air like a sentence. The waiter took the notebook. His hands were shaking imperceptibly. He tried to laugh, but the sound was stuck in his throat. "Thank you. I'm sorry." Daniel just nodded, a light gesture. Magnanimous. The waiter walked away, but something in him had broken. The phrase echoed, "Of what is yours?" Strange, almost prophetic. Why did he say it like that? Why that tone of an owner talking to an employee? The waiter stopped in the middle of the room. He looked back. Daniel was no longer looking at him, but his presence weighed heavily like a monument. For the first time, the waiter felt real discomfort. It wasn't fear. It was an instinctive recognition of an inverted hierarchy, as if the board had flipped without warning, as if he'd lost a game he didn't know he was playing. He returned to the counter. He leaned against the wall. He took a deep breath. The hostess walked past him. "All good. I don't know." He couldn't explain it, but there was something about that man, something that didn't fit the narrative he'd constructed. The manager watched from afar. His arms were still crossed, but now his gaze was more attentive. Daniel remained at the table. He took a sip of water. The gesture was simple, but it carried solemnity. He knew the fissure had opened. That control was slipping from the waiter's hands like fine sand, and he knew that, in a few minutes, the truth would explode in that room like a time bomb that no one saw being set off. The waiter looked at the manager. He took 2 steps toward him. He hesitated, but doubt was already planted, and doubt, in a fragile power structure, is the first symptom of collapse. The tables had turned, and the final showdown was seconds away. The waiter took a deep breath. He straightened his tie. He adjusted his jacket. He tried to regain the mask of authority that had slipped. He walked back to Daniel's table. His steps were firmer this time, or trying to appear so. "Sir, may I speak to the owner?" The question came out as a disguised ultimatum, as if summoning the owner were a summoning of a higher power. The final letter. The room continued its hustle and bustle, but some nearby tables began to pay attention. Daniel put his fork down on his plate. The sound of metal hitting porcelain echoed like a gong. He stood up, slowly. A controlled, almost ceremonial movement. The light from the chandelier fell on his face. Shadows danced across the lines of his jaw. He seemed larger than he was, a presence that occupies space without straining. The waiter took half a step back, instinct. Daniel straightened his jacket. He buttoned the single button on his blazer, a gesture that seemed like a silent war ritual. He looked the waiter in the eye, unhurried, unangry. Just naked truth. He's already here. Absolute silence. Nearby conversations died like extinguished candles. Cutlery froze in midair. The entire room became a frozen stage. The waiter blinked. Once, twice, 3 times. The information took a while to process, as if the brain refused to accept what the ears had just captured. "What? I'm the owner." Daniel didn't scream. He didn't need to. The voice came out firm, low, dense. Each word carried the weight of generations. The waiter opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. No sound came out. His face went 3 shades of white in 5 seconds. There was no screaming. There was no drama. Just the overwhelming presence of truth occupying every available space. Daniel remained standing, motionless, sovereign. His authority didn't come from the volume of his voice. It came from something older, deeper, ancestral authority, the same that sustained those who carried stones, who planted other people's land, who built worlds without ever owning them. Until now, the waiter backed away. He tripped over his own shadow. He tried to speak, but the words evaporated before they reached his mouth. The manager emerged from the corner where he had been watching. He walked quickly. His face was pale, his forehead glistening with sweat. The entire room watched, silent witnesses to a reversal no one saw coming. And Daniel, standing, occupied the center of the scene as if he had always been there, because he always had been. Not as a visitor, as a founder. The confrontation was served, and reparations began to be charged in real time. CTA natural. "What would you do if it were your sister in his place?" The manager came running. Stumbling steps, rapid breathing. The face, once flushed and confident, now held the whiteness of panic. He stopped 3 steps away from Daniel. He tried to smile. The smile came out crooked, broken at the edges. "Mr. Daniel, we didn't know you were..." Daniel raised his hand, a minimal gesture. Silent. The manager froze mid-sentence. His mouth hung open, the word hanging in the air. Yes, they knew. Daniel's voice was calm, unaltered, but it carried the weight of a final sentence. The manager opened his mouth again. He tried to argue, but Daniel's eyes wouldn't allow it. They knew I was black, and they thought that was enough information. The silence that followed was deafening. The entire room breathed together. No one chewed. No one drank. Everyone witnessed. The audience had switched sides. What had once been a courtroom was now a reparations hearing. The judges had become defendants. Daniel took a step forward, not threatening, just firm. The waiter, who was standing behind the manager, tried to back away, but his legs wouldn't budge. He stood there, paralyzed, like a pillar of salt. I didn't mean to. It was just protocol. His voice was thin, broken. Every word was a confession disguised as an apology. Daniel tilted his head slightly. Protocol for those who don't fit in the environment. Absolute silence. The waiter lowered his eyes. He couldn't hold them. Shame weighed more heavily than any accusation. And then, without being told, without ceremony, without warning, he bent the knee. He didn't trip. He wasn't pushed.
gave in. His body bent like a twig broken by its own weight. His right knee touched the cold marble floor. The imaginary camera captures everything in slow motion. The exact moment when the hierarchy collapses, the instant when power changes hands without violence, just truth occupying the space that was always hers. Daniel didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He just watched. He observed with the same serenity of someone who knows his own size, of someone who never needed to prove anything because he always knew who he was. The manager was pale. His hands were shaking. He tried to speak, but his voice failed him. Daniel took a deep breath. He turned to the room, to the witnesses, to those who filmed, to those who remained silent, to those who looked away. When a knee bends, a truth rises. The phrase echoed through the hall like a church bell. It wasn't revenge. It was justice being restored in real time. And the silence that closed the scene weighed like a velvet curtain falling over the last act. Solidarity, CTA. Share this story if you believe in change. Hours later, the hall was empty. Chairs raised on tables. Freshly mopped floors reflecting the still burning lights. The smell of disinfectant mixed with the lingering scent of truffles and wine. Daniel walked between the tables. His steps were slow, deliberate. His shoes echoed in the silence. He stopped in front of the table where it all began. The linen napkin was still folded there, untouched, a mute witness to a war that ended bloodlessly. He picked up the waiter's name tag, forgotten on the counter in the rush to leave. He held it between his fingers. He looked at the name engraved in silver letters. He placed his badge on the table, slowly, like someone making an offering. The place of service is sacred. The voice echoed through the empty hall, firm, complete. He paused. He breathed in the air still heavy with recent memories. But respect, nobody deserves that. It's earned. Daniel straightened his jacket. He buttoned his blazer, a gesture that had already become a ritual. He walked to the glass window. The city outside pulsed, yellow lights cutting through the night, cars passing by, life following its relentless rhythm. He observed his own reflection in the glass. He didn't just see the man in the impeccable suit. He saw the boy in the small kitchen. He saw his father with his calloused hands. He saw his mother packing lunches with dignity. He saw entire generations reflected in that glass. The mirror didn't lie. There stood a whole man, owner of his own narrative, builder of his own space. Not because someone allowed it, because he conquered it. He turned. He looked at the hall for the last time that night. Every table was a battleground won. Every chair, a testament to resistance. But it wasn't about revenge. It never was. It was about dignity taking the place that was always hers. Daniel walked toward the door. He turned off the last light. The hall was plunged into darkness, but not into oblivion. Because stories like this don't die when the lights go out. They echo. They pass through walls. They reach those who need to hear. And as Daniel walked through the door, one last truth hung in the air. They always forget that the ground is ours too. The door closed with a soft sound. The restaurant remained there, but it would never be the same again. Because when dignity takes its place, it rewrites the entire space. And Daniel walked down the sidewalk, not as if he were running away, as if he were planting, because his every step was now a seed. And seeds, when watered with truth, always flourish. If you like stories like this, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell to stay up to date with each new video. And don't forget to share so this video reaches more people and strengthens these voices.